Have we ever wondered why wars exist and what fuels them? It's a profound question, especially when we look at the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. In the grand tapestry of world affairs, threads of history, politics, and economics intertwine, often leading to complex and volatile situations. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is a prime example of this intricacy, a knot of tension that has been tightening for years, and now holds the world in a state of uneasy anticipation. The roots of this conflict reach deep, tapping into a wellspring of historical grievances, territorial disputes, and a struggle for identity. This war is not just a local issue confined to the borders of these two nations. No, it's a global concern, a chess game of power and influence that has the potential to redraw the lines of international alliances and affect economies worldwide. Caught in the crosshairs are the people of Ukraine and Russia, their lives upended by the harsh realities of war. But the ripples of this conflict spread far beyond, altering the course of geopolitics and causing shockwaves in international markets. One might ask, what sparked this conflict? Was it a sudden flare-up or the result of a slow burn? And more importantly, what will it take to extinguish the fire and restore peace? These are questions that beg answers, yet the truth remains elusive, shrouded in the fog of war and the intricacies of international relations. As we navigate this complex issue, we'll need to consider various perspectives, from the geopolitical to the humanitarian, from the economic to the historical. As we delve deeper into the timeline of events leading up to the war, let's keep this question in mind. To fully understand the current conflict, we need to go back in time and trace the origins of the Russia-Ukraine dispute. Our story begins in the late 20th century, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. In 1991, Ukraine declared independence from the USSR, marking a significant shift in Eastern Europe's political landscape. This move was met with mixed reactions, particularly from Russia, which had considered Ukraine a vital part of its sphere of influence for centuries. Fast forward to 2004, Ukraine found itself at a crossroads during the Orange Revolution. The country was torn between aligning with the European Union or maintaining close ties with Russia. This period of political unrest highlighted the deep-seated divisions within Ukraine itself, between those who favored European integration and those who preferred a closer relationship with Russia. Then came the year 2014, a year that would leave an indelible mark on the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Russia annexed Crimea, a region that had been part of Ukraine since 1954. This move was widely condemned by the international community, but it was also a clear signal that Russia was willing to assert its influence over what it perceived as its historical territory. In the years that followed, the tension between Russia and Ukraine escalated into a full-blown conflict in eastern Ukraine. This conflict, often referred to as the War in Donbass, saw pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk declare independence from Ukraine, leading to a violent and protracted war that continues to this day. The situation took an even more dramatic turn in 2023. The world watched in disbelief as Russia launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine, marking a significant escalation in the conflict. This move was met with widespread international condemnation, triggering a series of sanctions against Russia and sparking a major geopolitical crisis. Throughout these years, global powers have attempted to mediate the situation, but these efforts have largely been unsuccessful. The conflict has also had significant implications for world affairs, particularly for countries like Israel, which has historically maintained neutrality but is now considering a shift in policy towards supporting Ukraine. As we move forward in time, we see a series of events that have shaped the current state of affairs between Russia and Ukraine. From the dissolution of the USSR to the annexation of Crimea, the war in Donbass, and the recent escalation, the tension between these two nations has been building for decades. Now that we've seen how the tension has built up over time, let's move on to the reasons behind the war. So, what sparked this drawn-out conflict between Russia and Ukraine? To get to the root of this, we need to delve into a mix of geopolitical, economic, and ethnic issues. These elements, intertwined over the years, have created a complex tapestry of tensions that have culminated in the present conflict. Let's start with the geopolitical aspect. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, Ukraine and Russia embarked on separate paths. Ukraine slowly leaned towards the West, embracing democratic reforms and aligning itself with the European Union and NATO. Russia, on the other hand, saw this as a threat to its sphere of influence. The tug-of-war between the East and the West for Ukraine's alignment has been a significant contributing factor to the ongoing conflict. This brings us to the role of NATO and the EU. Both organizations offered Ukraine a path to join their ranks, a prospect that Russia viewed as a direct threat. This is because NATO, a military alliance, had been perceived by Russia as a hostile entity since the Cold War, and Ukraine joining NATO would mean NATO's border reaching Russia. The EU, on the other hand, represented economic threat. If Ukraine were to become a member of the EU, it could drastically reduce Russia's economic influence over the country. Now let's turn to the economic factors. Ukraine's economy has long been intertwined with Russia's. Both countries have relied on each other for trade and energy supplies. However, Ukraine's turn towards the EU threatened this economic symbiosis. The EU's economic policies and standards, which Ukraine would have to adopt, could potentially undermine Russia's economic hold over Ukraine. This shift has been a source of contention and has fueled economic tensions between the two countries. Finally, let's touch on the ethnic issues. Ukraine is a nation of diverse ethnicities, with a significant Russian-speaking population, especially in the eastern regions and Crimea. These areas have long felt a cultural and linguistic affinity with Russia. This ethnic complexity has been exploited and has added another layer to the conflict. So we see that the root causes of the Russia-Ukraine conflict are not just one-dimensional. They are a complex blend of geopolitical maneuvering, economic dependencies, and ethnic affiliations. These factors, simmering for years, have led to the present conflict that has not only affected Russia and Ukraine, but has also had far-reaching implications for the global community. Understanding these causes helps us see the bigger picture. Now let's examine how long this conflict might last. Predicting the end of a war is a complex task, but we can explore some scenarios. As we roll into the future of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the chessboard of international diplomacy becomes increasingly intricate. The potential outcomes of this conflict are as diverse as they are uncertain. Historically, conflicts of this nature often end in one of a few ways. A decisive military victory by one side is one possibility, but the tensions and resentments that fuel such wars rarely fade away with the fall of the final pawn. A negotiated settlement is another potential outcome. Here, both sides agree to cease hostilities and come to some form of agreement. This could mean a return to the status quo, or it could involve significant changes to borders, governance, and international relationships. However, reaching such a settlement requires both sides to be willing to compromise, a state of mind that is often elusive in the heat of conflict. Then there's the scenario of an indefinite stalemate, where the conflict essentially becomes a permanent fixture of the international landscape. This is far from an ideal outcome, as it perpetuates instability and human suffering. But it's not an uncommon ending for conflicts where neither side can gain a decisive advantage and neither is willing to negotiate or retreat. While these outcomes are based on historical precedents, they don't necessarily encompass all the possibilities. The future of the Russia-Ukraine conflict could also be shaped by unforeseen events or factors. For instance, a significant shift in the balance of international power could alter the course of the conflict, or grassroots movements within the warring nations could bring about unexpected change. One thing is clear: the uncertainty surrounding this situation is palpable. The stakes are high, and the ripple effects of this conflict are felt far beyond the borders of Russia and Ukraine. From shifting alliances to fluctuating gas prices, from humanitarian crises to tech wars, the impact is global and far-reaching. Interestingly, some nations have already begun to reevaluate their positions. Take Israel, for example. Traditionally neutral in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, recent developments suggest a potential shift in policy towards supporting Ukraine. This move, influenced by a variety of factors ranging from regional security concerns to international relations, underscores the fluidity of the situation. The future of the Russia-Ukraine conflict is a puzzle with many moving pieces. As we continue to monitor the situation, we must remember that the impacts of this conflict go beyond the battlefield. They seep into our economies, our politics, and our societies. The future remains uncertain, but the global community is undoubtedly feeling the impact. Let's delve into the economic implications. Wars don't just affect the countries involved, they reverberate across the globe economically. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is no different. Its economic impact has been felt across continents, influencing the global market and leading to potential economic crises. Let's consider the natural gas market, for instance. Europe and the United States have experienced significant shifts in natural gas prices since the onset of the conflict. These prices dropped to levels not seen since before the crisis, influenced by factors such as warmer weather, increased gas storage, reduced demand, and diversification of gas sources. While this drop has helped to lower inflation and ease consumer bills, the impact on retail prices has been slower due to fixed or capped pricing in some countries. Despite the recent drop, gas prices in Europe still remain high compared to historical averages. This poses challenges for businesses and consumers alike, creating a ripple effect that extends beyond the boundaries of the continent. But the economic impact doesn't stop at gas prices. The conflict has also affected the global markets. The uncertainty and instability of war can lead to market volatility, with investors becoming wary and cautious. This can result in decreased investments, affecting the growth and development of countries around the world. Moreover, the war has led to a shift in economic alliances. Countries have had to reconsider their economic ties, with some distancing themselves from Russia due to its actions. This has resulted in a reshuffling of global economic power, with potential long-term implications for international trade and cooperation. In addition, the conflict has the potential to trigger an economic crisis. The disruption of trade routes, increased military spending, and the impact on energy markets can all contribute to economic instability. This could potentially lead to a global economic downturn, affecting countries far removed from the immediate conflict. However, it's important to remember that these economic impacts are not set in stone. They depend on a variety of factors, including the duration of the conflict, the response of international actors, and the resilience of global markets. Furthermore, these economic impacts can also be a catalyst for change. They can push countries to diversify their energy sources, invest in new technologies, and seek new economic alliances. In this way, the economic fallout of the conflict could potentially lead to a reshaping of the global economic landscape. The economic aftermath of the war is widespread, but how has it affected international relations? In the global chessboard of politics, wars often lead to shifting alliances. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is no exception. This war has sent ripples across the world, influencing international affairs and relations in a myriad of ways, with key players reassessing their positions and alliances. Let's take Israel as an example. Traditionally, Israel has maintained strict neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had fostered a close relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This policy of neutrality continued under the leadership of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, with Israel even engaging in peace efforts during the early stages of the war. Israel's support at the time was mainly humanitarian, refraining from supplying weapons but offering intelligence and technical support to counter Iranian drones. However, with Netanyahu back in office, there's a potential shift in the wind. Israel is now considering a more supportive stance towards Ukraine. This potential policy change is driven by several factors, including a reduced Russian threat in Syria and the opportunity to test defense systems against Iranian weapons. Moreover, this shift could also be a strategic move to improve relations with the Biden administration. This shift, albeit potential, exemplifies how the war has influenced the stances of key international players. Moving across the globe, let's look at the economic powerhouse, Europe. The war has significantly impacted the natural gas prices in Europe. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, gas prices dropped to pre-crisis levels. This drop was brought about by a combination of factors including warmer weather, increased gas storage, reduced demand, and diversification of gas sources. While lower gas prices might seem like a good thing, it's not all smooth sailing. The impact on retail prices might take time due to fixed or capped pricing in some countries. Additionally, despite the recent price drop, gas prices in Europe are still high compared to historical averages. posing challenges for businesses and consumers. European countries have responded by investing in liquefied natural gas infrastructure to reduce reliance on Russian gas. However, there are still challenges, such as potential price spikes from supply disruptions. This is a clear example of how the war has forced countries to reassess their alliances and dependencies, in this case, energy dependencies. The Russia-Ukraine war has undeniably reshaped the world's political and economic landscape. It has forced countries to reevaluate their alliances, dependencies, and policies. However, one must remember that these shifts are not set in stone. Just as easily as alliances can shift, they can revert or transform into something completely different. The international community is akin to a complex web, with each thread interconnected. A tug at one end can cause ripples throughout the entire system. As alliances shift, the current status of the war becomes even more significant. Where do we stand today in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Let's delve into the present scenario. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues to evolve with changing dynamics. The global community is bearing witness to a historic tug-of-war, with world leaders navigating a complex chessboard of diplomacy, military strategy, and geopolitics. Israel, a significant player in Middle Eastern politics, has historically maintained a strict neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This stance was seen during the tenures of former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his successor, Naftali Bennett. However, the winds of change might be blowing. Netanyahu, now back in office, is pondering a shift in policy towards supporting Ukraine. The reduced Russian threat in Syria and the opportunity to test defense systems against Iranian weapons are key factors influencing this potential policy change. There's also the aspect of Netanyahu desiring to improve relations with the Biden administration. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of the conflict have been felt in the global energy markets. Natural gas prices in Europe and the United States have dropped significantly, returning to pre-crisis levels. This decline is a result of a cocktail of factors, including warmer weather, increased gas storage, reduced demand, and diversification of gas sources. While this has eased inflation and consumer bills, the impact on retail prices may take time due to fixed or capped pricing in some countries. However, the situation is far from stable. Despite the recent price drop, gas prices in Europe remain high compared to historical averages. This state of affairs poses challenges for businesses and consumers alike. Moreover, European countries' efforts to reduce reliance on Russian gas through investment in LNG infrastructure face hurdles, such as potential price spikes from supply disruptions. So the current state of the Russia-Ukraine conflict is a global chess game where moves and countermoves are being made. The war has not only transformed the geopolitical landscape, but also left its mark on the global economy. As we reflect on the current status, it's clear that this conflict has far-reaching implications. We've taken a deep dive into the Russia-Ukraine war, but what does all this mean for us? From the unresolved question of the conflict's end to the shifting alliances and economic impacts, we've traversed the expanse of this complex issue. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. We started with the timeline of tension, a chronicle of the events leading up to the war. We then delved into the root causes, the underlying factors that sparked this conflict. We discovered the historical and geopolitical dynamics that have fueled the unrest. And we realized that the reasons for war are often far more intricate than they seem. In our exploration of the future of the conflict, we pondered on the potential outcomes and their global repercussions. We then evaluated the economic impact of the war, understanding how it has rippled through world markets, affecting natural gas prices, and causing shifts in global economic trends. The shifting alliances, notably Israel's potential policy change, highlighted the evolving geopolitical landscape. We saw how global relations can be influenced by war, and how these relationships in turn can shape the course of the conflict. Finally, we looked at the current status, a snapshot in time of a situation that continues to evolve, a testament to the fact that in a globalized world, no conflict is an isolated event, and the ripples can be felt across the globe. As we reflect on these points, it's clear that the implications of the Russia-Ukraine war stretch beyond the borders of these two nations. They reach into the heart of world affairs, affecting global relations, economies, and the lives of people worldwide. As we continue to witness the unfolding of these events, we realize the importance of understanding the complexities of such conflicts and their global impact.